Hey guys, my name is Elijah from Rocket Sloth, and today we are celebrating 25 years of Mario Kart. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look back at all of the main Mario Kart game series in the franchise and kind of just see how it evolved over time. Right now, we're looking at Super Mario Kart that came out in 1992 on the Super Nintendo, and it's really impressive that this game, as simple as it was back then, really managed to make a decent looking and playing racing game, even for its time. Sure, the tracks were short, but it got our foot in the door for the Mario Kart franchise as a whole. A few years later, we got Mario Kart 64, which came out on the Nintendo 64, and just from looking at it, it's so impressive to see how the 3D models really looked on the Nintendo 64, and it really showcased the power and how much of a step up the Nintendo 64 was over the Super Nintendo. What I really like about this is we used Rainbow Road for all of the examples in this video, and you can almost see how the Mario Kart franchise was overhauled in each iteration of the game. Another thing that you can really take a look at is how the tracks in this game are so much longer and more thought out, and there's neon lights, and the music feels so much more full. It doesn't feel like you're on an old 8-bit or 16-bit console. You really can feel that the orchestration was so much higher quality, which really kind of attests to the Nintendo 64, almost more so than Mario Kart, but Mario Kart is a representation of what Nintendo has to offer, and I'm always impressed to see how Nintendo used Mario Kart as a tool to showcase the Nintendo 64's power, especially since there were other games coming out at this time like Star Fox 64 and Super Mario 64 had already been out, but this was like the first main racing game that people probably have experience playing. I think this was probably my first racing game that I ever actually played. So I always appreciate looking back at Mario Kart 64 just because of how special this game was for its time and how historically monumental Mario Kart 64 was for the Mario Kart franchise as a whole. It also allowed for 4-player split screen, which is really nice because it let people party up and play together, and the Nintendo 64 was known for that. We had games like Super Smash Bros., which also had that multiplayer, and I think that was one of the things that made the Nintendo 64 so successful. Next up, we have Mario Kart Super Circuit from 2001, which came out on the Game Boy Advance instead of a main console. So this was actually the first time we ever had a Mario Kart game on a handheld device, and similarly to the Super Nintendo version, it picks up very much of that old 16-bit feel. The levels are much more linear, there's less loops and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's really impressive to see that the Game Boy Advance had similar power to that of the Super Nintendo. And we saw that a lot of re-releases of old NES games on the Game Boy Advance and even Super NES games on the Game Boy Advance. So it was cool that there was an original game that was actually really solid and playable. And we can see in this Rainbow Road's a lot more flat, there's more jumps and boosts, but what I find really interesting about this one is how the coins are almost printed onto the track itself. The game also featured link cable, which allowed for multiplayer, which was something that was mostly used in Pokemon, but it was cool to see it on a Game Boy Advance. Next up, we're looking at Mario Kart Double Dash from 2003 for the Gamecube, and honestly, I have so many fond memories of this game, just because they took the concepts from the Nintendo 64 version and just expanded on it and made it double as good. They really tried to add some new mechanics that would make the game original and feel different than the rest of the games, and I think they really executed it well here by having the 2 players and the double items and the special items, and honestly I kind of was hoping they were going to bring some of those elements back in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Unfortunately, we only saw double items and not double players, but who knows, maybe in the future we'll see a return to the Double Dash series just because of how much fun it really was. But at the same time, you can tell also like the textures look so much better, and even though the GameCube might not have had the same power as like the PS2 or the Xbox, Nintendo knew how to use their hardware, and they made a solid game using the GameCube software. They added new different things to make the tracks unique. You can see even on this one, there's a lot more declines and inclines that are more balanced. You're not just free falling like you did on that Nintendo 64 version. So I really appreciated that effort that was put into Double Dash. Next up, we have Mario Kart DS, which was released back in 2005, and I had this Mario Kart game. It was one of my first DS games. I had Super Mario 64 DS also, but this game was so cool because it almost looks like the Nintendo 64, and almost even a little bit clearer than like the GameCube version, depending on what type of resolution you're playing on. If you're playing like on a good TV or if you're playing on like a really bad TV. But the Nintendo DS version of this game was a full-fledged game in 3D, and it really shows that the Nintendo DS was here to be the first 3D handheld console. The PSP didn't come out until a couple months after the Nintendo DS, so it was really amazing to see that Nintendo was capable of recreating hardware that just less than 10 years ago was a home console, and now we're looking at the Nintendo DS having a full-on Mario Kart game, and that's just really amazing to me. Next up, we're getting more into recent years, but we're looking at Mario Kart Wii from 2008, and you can just tell from the opening sequence how much effort they put into this game, into making the game feel expansive and huge. This game also introduced motorcycles, which was something we had not seen before. Prior to this game coming out, we just had cars, and now they were adding different types of vehicles to make the game a little bit different, which was really cool. I think we also saw more variety in the weight classes on the Mario Kart vehicles, which was nice, but like, just look at Rainbow Road on this one. Like, it looks so grand and so large, and it's really cool to see how this game series, and specifically this level that is so crucial to the franchise, how in every single Mario Kart game they have Rainbow Road. It's really cool to me to see how it's evolved over time. On top of that, this game also had the motion controls to control, where before it was played with a regular controller. So I think it's really interesting that people would tilt their Wiimote to make the cars turn and whatnot. They had the cool steering wheel adapter you could add and put the Wiimote in to steer the game, which was also cool. And they added that actually for the Switch recently, but honestly, we all know that we all did it with Mario Kart Wii and not for the Nintendo Switch, most likely. Next up, we have Mario Kart 7, which came out in 2011 for the Nintendo 3DS. And this game, similar to Mario Kart DS, really shows off the power of the 3DS. And besides the fact that the game is in 3D, which you can't see from this video, but if you had a 3DS and you were playing this game, you would be able to see the 3D resolution and the 3D picture and how that makes it feel more alive. It's a shame the 3D stuff didn't catch on, and honestly, I couldn't get into the 3D stuff. It hurt my eyes too much after a while, and even though the hardware got better with the new iterations of the 3DS over time, I still play with the 2D. But at the same time, you can see that this game was a step up from Mario Kart DS, and it's nice in general just to be able to play a Mario Kart game on the go. And just like Mario Kart DS, the 3DS took the things that were impressive and made things much bigger. And finally, we're looking at Mario Kart 8, which first came out in 2014 on the Wii U, but then they released the deluxe version earlier this year for the Nintendo Switch, and that's what we're looking at right now. But as you can see, they added a lot more to this. This is the first time it looks in true crystal clear HD, which is really nice to finally get to play Mario Kart in high definition, and it really shows. On top of that, they did a lot of new things with gravity. As you can see with Waluigi, he can ride on the platform even if it's going in a weird direction or whatnot. And that's just kind of like a cool little feature they added in, and bumping into other players makes you go faster. It's just the same new mechanics that Nintendo keeps adding to make their games different and make all the new Mario Kart games feel like good Mario Kart games. The power-ups were great. They brought back a lot of old power-ups. They brought in a couple of new power-ups. And overall, I really enjoyed this game. The battle mode on the Wii U version wasn't as good as the classic battle mode, but by the time they remastered it for the Switch, it was looking pretty solid. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this look back at the Mario Kart franchise as a whole. We upload tons of videos on gaming news, discussion, and history here at Rocket Sloth, your new #1 source for all things gaming.